Good morning. This is Ron. It is Monday, August the 13th. Welcome to Story Time. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your conservative host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo, the only one that's realistic. Speaking to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. So, unite the right over the weekend. BS. I got to throw as they say, the BS flag on this one because the folks that were congregating on the East Coast and having a rally are not of the right; they're of the left. Racism has always been of the left. Okay, and this is where the Republicans again aid and abet the left, where because they allow this to continue, they allow this whole idea, this whole notion that on the extreme right are the racists. So every time a Republican or conservative runs for office, the inevitable question comes: Are you going to denounce the racists? Are you going to denounce the KKK and all that? And it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be asked to. It should be the left that should be asked to denounce those folks because that's where they belong. So President Donald Trump could be doing it right now. He'd be an excellent voice to stand up and say, don't you dare talk about unite the right because you're not on the right, you're on the left. You belong to the left, you've always belonged to the left. The Nazis were racist, they were of the left. The communists were racist, they were of the left, et cetera, et cetera. All the people on the left, the Ku Klux Klan was left. Okay, so somehow, it's just a lot of effort on the Democrat Party side to make the effort to rehabilitate themselves, but rehabilitate themselves by smearing their opponents rather than simply apologizing, simply standing up and in front of America and saying, we're sorry. We screwed up. We were wrong. But instead of doing that, it's a lot easier to simply take your garbage and smear your opponents with it. Take your the lefties that you're far left that you're embarrassed about, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazi Party, etc., and pretend that they're Republicans or pretend that they're on the right when you damn well know they're not, that they're one of yours. Okay, we don't want your leftovers. We don't want your racist buttholes. They belong to you. You need to clean them up. So, having said that, now the issue comes as to why they're not just historical reason for why they belong on the left, but there is a deeper reason, and that is idealism. Racism is an idealistic outlook. So is everybody on the left, and that's why I always say that if you are an objectivist, if you are a libertarian, you are not on the right, you are not center, you're on the left. Because libertarians and objectivists, among others, among the communists and Nazis, etc., are idealists. They're all looking for an ideal society. Conservatism, true conservatism, is the only political philosophy that acknowledges reality and acknowledges that there is no evidence that we will ever have a perfect society. So the only difference between libertarianism and anybody else on the left is their goal. The libertarians want the perfect libertarian society, perfect liberty. Everybody is free to do whatever they want, whenever they want. Objectivists want the perfect objective society, getting whatever they want. Everything is done objectively, and without both libertarians and objectivists without force. So we got to completely rethink taxes. Taxes no longer apply. You have to pay for government in a different way. It has to be done voluntarily in some way, shape, or form. Good luck with that. And racism is also idealistic. They want the perfect racial society. If you're a white racist, then you want an all-white society, or at least a society that is dominated by or run by and for whites. And so again, it's idealistic, not realistic. So therefore, it belongs on and to the left. So anybody that tells you that, hey, you get your buddies, any of your lefty friends or relatives or whatever that are going to go on about how these folks are on the right, you've got the opportunity to correct them and say, how do you figure? How do you figure? How do you figure they're on the right? And then you can correct them and explain, no, they're idealistic and therefore they belong to the left, because the communists, the bulk of the left, the commies, they're ideal society people too. They're looking for a revolution to usher in what? Socialist paradise. Okay? Socialist perfect society. Never going to happen. No evidence of that at all. And thank goodness that there is no evidence that any of that stuff is going to happen. So, when I come back, it's going to be a little bit of Tammy Bruce. All right, thank you very much. And gotta love Tammy Bruce. She's a former lefty, and she knows how the left thinks. And so it's a pleasure to read this book. It's called The Death of Right and Wrong. And when we left at last, she was talking about the depravity and the way that they were getting people, trying to get people to accept the disintegration of culture, of our culture. And they do that by getting people to accept depravity. How they get them to accept depravity, she hasn't quite gotten into yet. We'll see if she does. And so this little section in this particular chapter is called A Contradiction in Terms. The left elite's values are contradiction in terms. Their values are that they have no values. Very shrewd. She recognizes that. That's right. Theirs is the standard of no standard. My friends on the left even ask, what's the danger of a morally relative culture? After all, they argue, everything is relative. What makes me happy doesn't necessarily make you happy, and so it's none of your business. Our world of gays and feminists, they claim, relies on people not coming to judgment about what we choose to do. In some ways, this is true, but this is the stage where respect for others should be a factor in our decision making about how we live our lives. Ironically, my friend's arguments, if seriously applied, would also make it impossible to intervene in some of the more heinous cultural, and she puts cultural in quotes, practices that they strenuously oppose, including apartheid, female genital mutilation, Islamic honor killings of women, and bride burnings. It is the left, with their multiculturalism and accompanying moral vacuum, that condemns women first, here at home and all around the world. And despite all the rhetoric you hear about the left being the protectors of American liberty, it is the left's moral failure that has kept America from being able to protect itself and others from the scourge of cultures that are not, thank you very much, on a par with the American way of life. Real quick, also, again, and they do this because they are looking for a revolution, and they don't care about, what honor killings or anything else. If they thought for a second that promoting honor killings would touch off the international socialist revolution, they do it in a second, because that's what they're interested in. Agitate to the point of getting a revolution, getting a socialist, an ideal socialist society. The isolated, multicultural, ghettoized world of the left refuses to consider the fact that everything we do as individuals affects everyone else. Instead, this is a world of self-gratification that requires an end to personal responsibility. Values, decency, and knowing right from wrong, and having the courage to act on that knowledge are all verboten. While the religious are marginalized as right-wing fanatics, extremists, or intolerant neoconservatives, the conditioning of the general public into moral relativism continues. We are told that gay men need to be understood, yet that gay community is full of men who are sexually compulsives, having hundreds of sex partners a year while spreading an incurable disease or two. Men and women who commit crimes are victims of society, a society that expects too much and gives them no other choice. Radical Islamist terrorists are agents of the oppressed, who, of course, have been victimized repeatedly over the last 50 years by the ugly American. In truth, radical jihadists are bitter men who are jealous of what others, America and Israel, have achieved and resentful at seeing what they will never accomplish on their own. Women's independence and liberty have come to mean freedom to be promiscuous and to be the sex objects that, ironically, we were demanding not to be at the beginning of the modern feminist movement. Courtesy of that effort, women are now free to live without dignity or the burden of self respect. That's not my type of feminism, but it is what you and your daughter are being fed daily by today's cultural elite. Why does the left in particular, as gatekeeper of our culture, seem bent on twisting it out of shape? It is not that you are out of touch with progressive new thinking. It's the fact that those who are the most determined to change your world are not acting with your best interests, values, or virtues at heart. They act with only themselves in mind. Damage and the left's malignant narcissism. From where does this madness spring? Why this compulsion to change our society's culture to mirror the left elite's own worldview? This pattern of the left elites projecting their issues onto society isn't as odd as you may think. It makes perfect sense, according to the most respected psychoanalysts of our age. Childhood trauma, stress disorders, and the resulting malignant narcissism all play a part in the left's victim mentality and their effort, mostly subconscious, to shape our world to mirror their own damaged psyches. Pathological narcissism was first described in detail by Freud. The onset of narcissism may occur in infancy, childhood, or early adolescence. It is commonly attributed to childhood abuse and trauma inflicted by parents, authority figures, or even peers. What is narcissism? Quote, a pattern of traits and behaviors which signify infatuation and obsession with oneself to the exclusion of all others, and the egoistic and ruthless pursuit of one's gratification, dominance, and ambition. Unquote. While narcissism takes root early, it is possible to manage one's narcissism, especially with professional help, and at least keep it from moving into the aggressively destructive stage of malignant narcissism. The syndrome of malignant narcissism, originally described by psychoanalyst Otto Kernberg, has been widely referred to by political psychologists in characterizing leaders who pose a threat to civil society, political stability, and world order. I know some of this is a little technical, but stay with me. It's worth it because it helps make sense of so much of what is going on in the world. In an interview with the semi-annual journal What is Enlightenment, Kernberg put it this way. This pathological idealization of the self as an aggressive, self-clinically, an idealization of the self as an aggressive, self-clinically is called malignant narcissism, and this is very much connected with evil and with a number of clinical forms that evil takes, such as the pleasure and enjoyment in controlling others, in making them suffer, in destroying them, or the casual pleasure in using others' trust and confidence and love to exploit them and to destroy them. The core components of this syndrome are pathological narcissism, antisocial features, paranoid traits, and aggression. Self-preservation, self-promotion, and maintaining power are all traits that prevail in the malignant narcissist. The people and issues that supposedly serve it exist only to be exploited for their own benefit. I have participated at both the local and national levels of NOW. I've spent time with other feminist and gay special interest groups and their leaders. I've worked in the entertainment industry and closely with all forms of news media. And I've worked with political campaigns for Democratic candidates. Can you imagine NOW endorsing a Republican? I've also spent a fair amount of time around universities. I can say with full confidence that what I have seen driving and controlling the actions and agenda of the left elite in all those venues, culturally, politically, and socially, is malignant narcissism. Issues are used and people are exploited for the sake of power. Malignant narcissism is the god of the left elite. Trauma and no recovery. What I am seeing today in the activist ranks of NOW and the gay power elite is something of which I have firsthand knowledge. You see, as I related in the introduction, I was a perfect candidate for leadership in the left elite, specifically because of the trauma I experienced in my youth. I was subconsciously attracted to the political spectrum that feeds on, exploits, and ultimately projects its demons onto the culture. Dr. Judith Herman, an associate clinical professor of psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School, notes in her seminal book, Trauma and Recovery. Trauma isolates. The group recreates a sense of belonging. Trauma shames and stigmatizes. The group bears witness and affirms. Trauma degrades the victim. The group exalts her. Trauma dehumanizes the victim. The group restores her humanity. Dr. Heumann actually makes note of the similarity between the emergence of the modern feminist movement and consciousness raising, which is really a type of group therapy for women. She couldn't be more right. From knowing and working with hundreds of left-wing activists and leaders, I can say that a common thread bound us together: damage, the physical and or emotional trauma we experienced as children and or young adults. Feminist activists especially always had a story, usually heartbreaking, often violent. It could include childhood sexual abuse or sexual assault in the teen years. The multiple personality disorders of more than one National Now board member were actually discussed openly at many board meetings, as if the meeting were indeed a sort of group therapy session. Domestic violence, beating his children, suicide in the family, you name it. Dr. Herman considered this consciousness raising or group therapy to be the manifestation of the modern feminist movement. Quote, it was also no accident that the initial method of the feminist movement was called consciousness raising. It took place in groups that shared many characteristics of psychotherapy. A privileged space made it possible for women to overcome their barriers, allowing them to name their injuries, unquote. Why is this important? Because there's a third stage of recovery that is ignored by feminist and gay special interest groups, the stage where the group is supposed to concern itself with reintegrating the survivor into the community of ordinary people. In other words, face your issues, deal with them, get the help you need, and rejoin life. Not as a victim, mind you, but as a survivor and as your ordinary self. Failure of the left elite is that it requires of its leaders and its activists that they move on to this third stage of recovery. Dr. Herman oddly lauds the fact that the feminist consciousness raising groups, full of individuals who clearly need psychological help because of past traumas, were focused on social change rather than on individual change. So the only thing that Tammy Bruce is missing here, at least so far, maybe she's going to cover it a little bit later in the chapter, is the seeing the post-Marxist influences here at play, and that the whole reason for all of this creating these groups, whether you're gay or lesbian, feminist, etc., Black Panther, etc., is in further of Marxism. Post-Marxism is saying that any oppressed group of people can start the revolution instead of being just the workers, just the proletariat. And so that's the reason that these groups are created, is so that they can be used to hopefully create the socialist revolution, worldwide socialist revolution that will result in socialist paradise. Of course, no evidence of any such thing occurring. And but again, love Tammy Bruce. She's got a much better handle on what goes on in the left, how they think, than does Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, or anyone else on the radio. When I come back, philosophy according to House. Thank you very much. Let's see. Philosophy according to House, we were dealing with Sartre and existentialism, and how existentialism applies, and how House House seems to be the ultimate existentialist. In House, patients in the diagnostic lab challenged the expertise of their physicians, while Dr. Gregory House challenged both his patients and his colleagues' beliefs about the practice of medicine. A maverick in both attitude and action, House revels everyone's feathers. He constantly bucks the authority of his superiors and turns his subordinates' expectations on their head. Much to the chagrin of his associates, he frequently breaches the bounds of professional and personal ethics. Take House's decision to use electroshock therapy to wipe out the memory of a young firefighter who was stricken with life-threatening heart attacks, catalyzed by the presence of his unrequited love. In quotes, words and deeds. That's, I guess, the episode. Though the treatment stops the instances of cardiac arrest, it comes at a great cost. House literally erases substantial portions of this man's life and identity, portions that we later realize may have not needed removal. Others, a painful need. While others create profound feelings of anxiety and concern, Sartre is nevertheless clear that we need others. Individuals need both the care of and interaction with others in order to develop the cognitive abilities, emotional repertoire, and moral attributes we see as essentially human. While Sartre is strangely silent on the most obvious way in which humans are dependent upon others, namely the physiological dependence of infants and children on caregivers, he is clear that without interaction with others, we would not have language, self-awareness, or an objective identity. In House, the dependence that individuals have on one another is made evident through the medium of medicine. Patients who go to Princeton Plainsboro need medical care they cannot provide themselves. The patients placed with House's diagnostics team are an even more obvious example of dependence. Affected with illnesses that other physicians have been unable to diagnose or treat, they depend on House for their survival. Of course, this is why they and House's colleagues are willing to put up with House. Despite his drug addiction, his abrasive personality, and his defiance of authority, he is simply too good a physician to lose. Too many lives depend on him. And that's all. There's a theory at work, and that is to be so needed or so necessary that you can't be fired. And so House has basically achieved that. There's also a counter theory that says if you're so needed that you can't be fired, you can't be promoted either. So same thing. House is kind of stuck where he is. He's not going to be able to go, generally speaking, anywhere else. Part of that is, of course, due to his lack of ethics and his abrasive personality, etc. When it comes to the dependence we have on others, the emergence of self-awareness and personal identity are of special interest to Sartre. According to Sartre, interaction with others is necessary to the emergence of reflective consciousness. Prior to engagement with others, individuals are conscious, but they are not self-conscious, effectively illustrating his point with the example of someone absorbed in the act of spying through a keyhole until someone spies him from behind and turns him into an object. Sartre argues that it is only through encounters with others that we are brought to fully realized self-consciousness. Also, I want to make a note that with Sartre, you can see here, Sartre has nothing to do with philosophy or things philosophical. If philosophy properly understood is about things intellectual and things that are realistic. And Sartre is about things that are imaginary, very much about the things that are imaginary, and therefore psychologistic in nature. So he's much more psychologistic than he is philosophical. House illustrates the role others play in the development of self-consciousness as well. The members of House's team hold the key to their patients' awareness of themselves, and in diagnosing ailments, those physicians simultaneously heighten their patients' self-consciousness. Interestingly, through their interaction, Cuddy, Wilson, Cameron, Foreman, Chase, and even House are more reflective and self-aware because of one another's presence. While extraordinarily important in itself, self-consciousness is also essential to the development of an objective identity. To have a self means to have in one's mind an objective sense of oneself, a sense of one's characteristics, aptitudes, and likes and dislikes. Oh, look at that. Looks like I'm going to have to decide. I've had reading from a sample. There we go. That's interesting. Anyways, a sample of House and Philosophy. Subtitle is Everybody Lies. And so now I'm at the point where I'm going to have to make up my mind whether or not to buy it. But again, going over this, one of the places that philosophy went wrong was psychology. For a long time, nobody knew anything about psychology. Aristotle knew nothing about it. Plato knew nothing about it. Socrates, all the Greeks, they don't know anything about psychology. They didn't come along until you got to Freud. So, and then when Freud came up with psychology and things psychological, it encouraged people like, various different philosophers to, um, I would, for lack of a better term, get confused and start waxing psychological rather than sticking to issues that are truly philosophical. And again, the difference between the two being reality or realism. Those things that are real are the province of philosophy, where things imaginary are the province of psychology or the psychologistic. So they also have, which is interesting because they have a book that's called House and Psychology. Humanity is Overrated. So I might have to get that. Let me see. Okay, there's another book, House, which is an official guide. Oh, and Chasing Zebras, which is another House book. And let's see, Breaking Bad and Philosophy, Batman and Philosophy. So it's all kinds of interesting um, issues or books that are supposed to illustrate various philosophical concepts. But anyway, so we're going to leave this one here for the time being. And in a minute, I'm going to be reading a couple of jokes from the New York City Cab Driver's Joke Book. Okay, thank you very much. And so the New York City Cab Driver's Joke Book is written by Jim Peach, an actual New York City cabbie, and he's collected a whole bunch of jokes. And so here we are. A man told me that he was walking along the street one day when he saw a blind man with a seeing eye dog walking along ahead of him. The light turned red, the man told me, and I saw the dog stop. As they were standing on the corner waiting for the light to change, I noticed that the dog lifted his leg and pissed on the man's trousers. Then, said the man incredulously, I saw the blind man reach into his pocket and give the dog a biscuit. At this point, I'd caught up with him, and as I was standing next to the man and his dog, waiting for the light to change, I couldn't resist asking, Excuse me, sirs, but I just saw your dog piss on your leg, and then I saw you give the dog a biscuit. The blind man turned toward me, and I swear he looked me straight in the eye and said, I know that. I was just trying to find out where his head is so I can kick him in the ass. And on that note, we come to the end of another episode of Story Time. Thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.